how it affects your real estate. So today I asked Lene Ali DeRutter to come in and talk to us about that because she is a divorce attorney. And I think it's important to hear from a divorce attorney on how you help guide your clients through the process when it comes to their real estate and their divorce. So I know right now, I don't know if it's my age. I don't know if it's just where my friends are in their lives, but I tend to get more questions lately on divorce and how it affects their real estate. I think it's because a lot more of my friends are going through that process. So I wanted to have you come in and just kind of tell us a little bit about that. So my first question for you is, how often do you get the question, "What do we do with our house in the divorce?"
So that's in the consultation.
Okay.
So when a potential client comes in on a consultation, you go over the issues, whether there's child issues in this property. When you narrow it down to the property, one of the first questions is, do you own a home? And then do you own multiple homes? Because there's a lot of people who, you're getting a lot of the, baby boomer divorces
Right.
that are happening. And so it's not just one marital residence, it's rental homes.
Okay.
So they're trying to figure out how to manage all of that.
Okay.
And sometimes you have buildings in there as well. So in that process, when they come in and they've identified that there's this real property, whether it's just one or multiple, it's essential to know whether or not just what they want to do with it, but do they have a real estate agent that they trust, that they know is going to be honest and understand their situation, and that knows the market.
Okay.
So a real estate agent is a realtor is very, very important to the divorce process.
Okay. So if they have an agent, then the next step would be having that agent do a market analysis of the property to find out what it's worth.
Sometimes, it kind of depends on the divorce and how it proceeds. But if they're not doing appraisals, because a lot of times they'll bring in appraisals, but for
Right.
like myself as a divorce attorney, I don't really know a lot of appraisers.
Okay.
And that I don't have a lot in my toolkit.
Okay.
And so who do I go to? I go to a realtor.
Okay.
So the realtor that they rely on, or if they don't have someone, I tell them, oh, here, you need to contact, these 3 people.
Okay.
These are 3 people I would trust.
Okay.
And so then I'll contact them and say, hey, hey, Kim, do you have an appraiser that you would trust?
Okay.
If we don't do the appraisal, because a lot of times people are like, we're not gonna pay to have
Spend that money.
right? We're not gonna spend that money. Then yes, then we go to the realtor and say, what are the comps? What is the market value? What do you think they would, it would sell for if they sold it within the next 30 days?
Okay.
And then we're trying to figure out how much equity is there and what we're dividing.
Right.
Everything in the divorce on the property side is putting it into a line item in a spreadsheet and moving those numbers around so that there's the legal term, the fair and equitable division of the property. And so the real property, the marital residence, and it depends what side you're on.
Right.
Right. So
Okay.
it depends what side you're on of how much you want that house to be.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So let's say that you represent the female in this divorce.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, because of myself being a female,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my girlfriends will ask me, what do we do with the real estate?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times I advise them not to keep the real estate in the divorce. The reason that I suggest that is it's probably got a lot of deferred maintenance that maybe they
Mm-hmm.
can't maintain and afford to maintain. B, can they even afford the property on their own? But a lot of times I think emotionally the women feel connected to the home because of the children maybe,
Right.
and the fact that they had their children there, or their children, they don't want to displace the children. So let's talk about kind of that process, and is it advisable for them to keep that real estate, or would it be better off if they move out and everyone starts clean?
I think you're the best person to advise them on that. So
Okay.
you're the expert in that. And the thing that I think is great about you is that you are very cognizant and aware of the emotional parts to all this.
For sure.
It's the divorce part is it's such heightened emotion. And so even on for myself and then whoever's on what we call your divorce team,
Right.
it's important that we're aware of that and we're trying to guide them through that in the best way possible, right?
Right.
So it depends, and part of what you need to do in the divorce at the very beginning is with your friend that's talking to you is you need to say, look, let's figure out how much you can really afford,
Right.
and work with someone that's on your team, like a mortgage person that can see if they would even pre-qualify and be able to afford it.
Right.
And then if they can't, have that conversation with them and see what other options are out there. I do think, yeah, people get very, very attached to their homes. And it is, I mean, I'm attached to mine.
Right.
It's really hard to let go of it. But part of this process is it's a new chapter, right? They're
For
closing
sure.
one
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to the next. And so what's most important is having someone like you
Right.
that's going to understand that, but advise them to set them up in the best way possible.
Okay.
And their kids are resilient.
Very.
Right?
Yeah,
Right.
very.
Yeah.
I think most of the times the kids are much more resilient than the parents, of
Right.
course, when it comes to this situation. I find that a lot. So let me ask you this: what would be the very first thing if I'm ready to talk about getting a divorce? What's the very first thing I should be doing to get ready for that process?
Oh my goodness. You should be information gathering.
Okay.
Right? People usually are, consultations a lot of times are very reactionary.
Okay.
You get a call, somebody's had it. I can't be with my spouse anymore.
They're
And they're running
frustrated.
down there. And there's a lot of people that will consult with me and I don't see them again because they've gone to counseling.
Okay.
Right? That's not the best way to, you don't want me to be the first call.
Okay.
You want to start kind of getting together a plan. So if you know that you're headed down that road for divorce and you think this is probably what's going to be best for all of us, start gathering all your financial information. Start figuring out, what am I going to do when I'm a single person,
Okay.
and whether I'm, and particularly for a female, if they're, and there's a few males, but mostly the females staying home, right?
Right.
If they're staying home, how am I going to take care of myself?
Mm-hmm.
And start figuring that plan out. I also tell people to start putting money aside.
Okay.
And that's probably not, but it is a thing. So,
Right.
If you can have a conversation with your spouse, of course, have a conversation. The best thing to do for the parties is for them to try to control the process,
Right.
not put it in the hands of the attorneys and a judge. As much as we have phenomenal judges in Collin County, they're amazing, and Dallas as well. But I'm partial to Collin, but you don't want a stranger deciding your future. So if you
Right.
can work things out with your spouse,
Right.
have that conversation and gather the financial information, have the documents to support showing what's in the estate, what's the values, and come up with your plan. Then go talk to an attorney and say, okay, these are all the things I've done. What do you think?
Okay.
Right? And then start identifying who's on your team, like your realtor.
Okay.
Right?
All right. Okay. So the very first thing is information gathering. And that would be knowing what your house is worth, of course, knowing what the property value would be, and what are we going to do with this house, or at least what do we think we're going to do with this house. So that would be the first thing, and then to call you and come have a consultation. Okay. All right.
And I would say maybe the first step should be to have a conversation with the spouse if you can. But I
Yes.
know sometimes that's not the time.
Okay. So at least trying to have a conversation
trying,
with
yeah.
your spouse. Okay.
That's not like I'm divorcing you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
A conversation, then gather your facts,
Yeah.
and then meet with you and have a consultation with you. Okay. So if there is one mistake that you see people make, what would that mistake be when they're going through this process? Do they have lots of mistakes they make, or
It's a loaded question. Like, oh my gosh. Because divorce is it's hard. Well, one I can think of when you're talking about a lot of your friends that are
yes,
coming to you, is that the natural role that's occurred in those relationships has been that the husband kind of has managed the finances
okay,
and the wife has managed the children,
okay,
right? So then they're getting ready to get divorced and they have no financial information.
Mhm.
They don't know that a retirement account got moved over to some wealth manager with other investments, and they have no idea how much is there, how much was contributed, and that sometimes is very detrimental
yes,
because there's, sometimes they're self-employed people who are moving finances or moving investment accounts under their entity umbrella,
Mhm.
and that's creating problems. They don't know anything about the house. They don't know what's left on the mortgage. They
Right.
don't know. They have no knowledge of it, and then they come in ready for a divorce, and there's a process that you can go through in litigation, in
Mhm.
divorce litigation, to get that information,
okay,
but it's going to cost more.
right,
It's
Takes time.
sometimes you have to fight for it,
Right.
right? Because if there's something going on that maybe shouldn't be going on, the other side's not going to be readily giving it to you.
right,
And so it just amplifies the difficulty for the party who's in the dark.
What's interesting about what you just said is, even as the real estate agent, when I'm helping people buy houses, sell houses, it amazes me how many times one party doesn't know their financial situation when they're going to buy a house, sell a house, whatever the process. It amazes me. And I sometimes find when it's the women, it kind of disappoints me a little bit, because I think about that and I say, you know what, gosh, what if something happened to him? Would you know where all the bank accounts were? Would you know, would you know what to do? Not just a divorce situation, but any situation that if you needed to get to the money quickly, would you know how to do that? Would you know how to make the mortgage payment?
Right.
Who do you make the mortgage payment to? So it's interesting you say that, because I see it on the flip side. Even when we're not in a divorce situation, I see it on that flip side and think, wow, okay, that. And it's one of those things, as a mother of daughters, that I'm like, okay, we're going to raise very strong girls, that this doesn't happen to them, hopefully, right? So that
well, I have control issues,
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't happen because I have to be in control.
Right.
So, but no, but I think that naturally is what happens because everybody's so busy in life, and you have to divide and conquer.
You divide and conquer, for
but
sure.
Then you get 15, 20 years down the road, and you realize, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and I have no idea how much money we have, or
and
how little money we have.
The shocker for people, right, is that they get 15, 20 years down the road, and they might have had problems or issues or not been connected or drifted apart, but their spouse was someone they trusted.
Right.
Well, some switch flips, and they can't trust them, and now you realize, gosh, maybe I've been taken advantage of, or he's, he or she's been, spending all this money gambling that I had no idea about, or
for sure,
whatever. I mean, it's just unfortunately, it is what happens. It's shocking.
Okay. All right. So anything else that you can think of that, if it comes to your real estate, or as, okay, this is really where I'm headed, anything else you think that would be helpful to the people listening?
I mean, it's the whole preparing in advance, information gathering. Talk to your realtor before.
Okay.
You have a realtor. Talk to your realtor, because that's part of making your plan.
Right.
Do you want to keep the house?
Right.
Right. So if you want to keep the house, talk to your realtor about that and what that looks like. Work with your realtor and her team to find out if you can afford it. See if you could pre-qualify if you had to take it on your own. Right. And if you can't, then talk to your realtor.
Right.
And say, okay, I can't, but I want to have a home for my family.
Right.
What are my options? I mean, do those things before you start going into divorce, because one, it's going to give you peace of mind. You're not going to feel so scattered in,
like, where are we going?
Yeah,
what are we doing?
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to be displaced from my home. I'm worried about my children. All this stuff. You're going to feel like it's okay if I'm not in my home, and they have someone that trusts. That's the really important thing, I think. And you know this. You've done this for so long. You know this, but it's so emotional. So having that support team, and I call it your divorce team,
right?
But having that support from a realtor to a financial planner to a counselor to an accountant,
right?
When you have those people, because you're on your divorce team that you go to, that you trust,
your team,
that's big,
right?
That's big, and it will minimize the pain of divorce. It really will.
It's interesting, because I had a girlfriend several years ago who got a divorce, and she didn't want to keep the house. She didn't want it. It was too much house for just her and her two kids. And so we sold the house. She moved into a rental home. We found a great rental home. We kept the kids in the same school. I mean, we really planned this. We kept her in a rental home for a year, and then she moved to an apartment for a year after the rental home, and then she just bought back in the old neighborhood that she originally came from, but in a much smaller house. But it was, we had a process. We knew the plan. We knew that she was going to do a couple different rental situations, and then she was going to buy again. So, and I have another girlfriend doing the same thing, and I told her, listen, if he's willing to buy you out, take the buyout.
Right.
Take the buyout. Let me put you into a temporary situation, and then we'll go look at houses when it's a better time for you to buy. So that's always my advice, is let's really look at the big picture. And I hear you saying that. Let's look at the big picture here. Is it worth keeping the real estate? Is it affordable for you to keep the real estate? Because there's a lot more than just paying that mortgage payment that goes into keeping that real estate.
Right.
There's a lot of issues that come up with your real estate. So.
And you're the expert on that, right?
Right.
And so you're so invaluable to someone going through a divorce, and you're someone who understands it, and you understand the dynamics, and you understand that there's other options. And so you are invaluable to that person because on the attorney side, I mean, we can tell you what you need to know. We can tell you what your issues are. We will always tell you what your issues are, but we can do all of that. But we're not knowledgeable enough to say, we don't know the market.
Right.
You know, we work with people who are in mortgages that can go and pre-qualify
Right.
and they can tell you, but that's not our, that's not our
Well, and real
Good.
estate is a local driven market. It is a
Right.
neighborhood to neighborhood
Right.
situation. So even though you might know Allen, for example, you might not know that neighborhood. So that's why a real estate agent is really important, because they are going to know specific neighborhoods
Right.
and what that neighborhood brings. So
Another important thing too, if you have a client that's going through a divorce, as a realtor, another important thing is to start gathering the documents on the purchase of that home.
mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times we have found, and this has happened to me this year a couple times now, that the parties were under the impression that they purchased a home together,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't under the law. It wasn't community property under the law, because the timing of where they purchased it was actually pre-marriage.
Okay.
So that changes everything, right?
Okay.
And then it becomes like you might have had two couples where one had more available resources, so they put money down,
Gotcha.
but both parties are on the deed.
Right.
So getting all those documents together, or you might have where someone starts claiming that they had purchased the home with their separate property funds, and now you've got that issue, and so you have to have all the purchase documentation.
Right.
So start getting that. If you have a client or friend that you know is getting ready to go through divorce, it's not just knowing what is the current financial state.
How did you
all
purchase
the
this
purchase
property?
documents,
Okay.
all the documents that would show where the funds came for any down payments.
Okay.
Gather all of that.
That's huge.
That's
That isn't
huge.
something that I've ever thought about.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's huge, and it's interesting. I had a case recently, and the party had sold their house pre-marriage, separate
Mhm.
property house, and the proceeds funded into his account after, like, a month after he got married, and those proceeds went towards another real property.
Mhm.
But because the real property was purchased, and it was a second home, was purchased during the marriage,
Right.
the presumed community property, so now you have to prove everything,
Right.
and now you're trying to go back and you're doing all the work after the fact, right? You're trying to go back and get all these documents because you have a higher burden
Okay.
to show.
Okay.
So getting those documents at the beginning is important too.
Okay.
And
Something
people
I had
flip.
not thought about.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or you have situations where a husband, well, I say husband or husband wife, somebody had funds that they purchased the home during the marriage,
Mhm.
right? But they're saying those are separate property funds I had before. Well, if you got a 25-year marriage, that's really hard to
go
get.
back and prove. Okay.
But then you might refinance, and then you have the party on the deed. You
Yeah.
have both parties on the deed, so now is it a gift?
Okay.
So instead of doing all of that in the when you're going through the divorce process, go to your realtor and say, okay, I just want to make sure
Right.
that this is a home
Right.
that we purchased in our, it's community property.
Okay.
So can we get all the documentation? Can we get the deeds and the purchase?
Well, I've
the
never
closing
thought about that
documents?
because I know that Texas is a community property state.
Mhm.
So I guess I've always thought, well, you're married, so it's a community property state. But what you're saying is if a spouse put in money before the marriage towards the real estate, before they were married, he or she's entitled to some of that money.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it gets super complicated because the characterization is based on the inception of title. So if it's purchased during the marriage,
Okay.
but then if it's funded solely in either all cash or they look to separate income prior to the marriage for the loan. I mean, there's all these things that start happening to where you start figuring out, was it a mutation of something? And then you have reimbursement claims and everything else. So
Okay.
it can become very, very complicated.
Yes.
And the thing about that in a divorce is that complicated equals expensive.
Right.
And then you have to get expert witnesses in. So you save yourself pain if you
And
have-
money.
right, pain and money, and spending money on divorces is pain, definitely pain. If you get your realtor that you trust to say,
Right.
can I get all these documents?
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So, the very last thing I will say is clearly you need not only a great realtor on your team, but you need a great divorce attorney on your team
Yes.
that knows the best way to fight for you and to make sure that you're getting everything that you're due in a fair process. So, if people want to talk to you, how can they get a hold of you?
They can call my office at 214-939-3000, which is Calabrese Spudner, or they can look me up online, which is at calabrespudner.com.
Awesome. All right. I appreciate you coming in and doing this. This was awesome. And if you guys have any further questions about real estate, you can call us at 214-662-9308. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kim.